And we are live. Gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Mecca of Banter podcast. It's kind of crazy to think about. Like this time last year, we were kind of kicking off to get back in the booth with like one of the biggest episodes that we've recorded, recapping the finals of the World Cup. So that's coming up on a year, if not we're already at a year of the finals. So kind of crazy to think about one calendar year, all of the episodes we've done, but nevertheless, we have this week's edition of the Mecca of Banter to get into, and boy, do we have a juicy one with a double match week coming this week. But before we kick into all the spiciness of the weekend, we'll get some intros. So, I'm this week's host. It's Henry Wind. You can find me on Twitter at Henry Wind. It's a great week to be a Manchester United fan. I say this most weeks, just about every single one, because Chelsea Football Club is still a club. So, great week to be a Manchester United fan. And speaking of Chelsea, we'll throw it over to Nikki. How you doing tonight, brother?
Absolutely. I was coming fully prepared to talk St. Louis City and all the transfer rumors that have been going around there because watching the other club that I support is awful. And I
Won't
did not
even
have a
say
good
the name.
They who shall not be named.
But I'm here because so I don't get fined. You can follow me on Twitter at Hayfie4. But happy to dive in. I will say I did watch a decent amount of footy this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So it gave me a little perspective. But yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that perspective. Your takes are always welcomed on this podcast. So thanks for being here, and thanks for the integrity of showing up, even though you don't want to. So a man that has a lot to talk about, Andy Hoover. How we feeling?
Always do. Feeling great. I'm proud of Nicky. Nicky's got some real resolve. There's no way around it. He's out here. He gets into this podcast. My team and everyone else is here and there sees more 3 points. But had we not had the double weekend, I would have been the only 3 points this weekend, which would have been awesome. But that didn't happen. So happy to chat about it.
Yeah, I think we're still waiting on a weekend where all of us have won. I don't think it's happened yet. On the
Well, I
pod.
support Chelsea, so we're kind of fucked there.
Yeah, it's just not gonna happen. Maybe you just drop out next week and we'll find it. But last but certainly not least, number 2 in our hearts and number 2 on the table, Lucas Winkleman. How we feeling?
Good boys. 3 points in the last week. Points are points. It's a long season. Villa are a good team, and I'm excited to talk about that game. But been looking forward to this since last week. Honestly, I feel like with all the midweek games, there's so much to go over, and so many good goals were scored, so many interesting VAR choices yet again. But yeah, happy to be here. Happy to see you guys. Wish there were more of us, to be honest.
Yeah, dude. We have a weekend recap for the crew, which is really a week recap. And as Nick mentioned, we do have some St. Louis City news, which is fantastic. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had it. So we're excited to get into that, and then we'll finish with a factor cap. Nick, do you have something to say?
I was just going to say, before we get into it, I just wanted to say a statement that I had over the weekend and a little bit of realization that I had.
Sure.
I had forgotten when this podcast originally started that we had a host on here by the name of Sean Hughes. That man was a Southampton fan, and we all know where Southampton consistently sat in the table. So I kind of took a book out of Sean's page this week and watched some other footage so I can actually bring some more context to this podcast. Because if I had to watch Chelsea all week and talk about them, it would be awful. So I'm here to chat.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, man. And honestly, the results this week were crazy. Like there's a lot to dig in, to get into. Let's do it. Let's start off with midweek. We had Luton versus Arsenal. Arsenal squeaked by the hair of their chinny chin chin on a 4-3 win against Luton. Lucas, do you want to kick it off? Because what a weird game for you all, and the wheels are falling off.
Bold statement coming from a United fan.
Hey, man,
the least
up on the weekend, eh?
To say the least. Beat Luton away 4-3, like they say. Luton's, not everybody can do it on a rainy day in Luton. but we
It's
did.
not for everyone.
It's not. You know, Declan Rice is him. We severely underpaid. I don't know if you guys saw on Twitter, but a bunch of Arsenal fans in England started a GoFundMe page for £25 million to pay West Ham because that's how much we underpaid them, apparently, which is just
ridiculous thing I've
electric.
ever seen.
I know, but just electric. Great banter. But yeah, honestly, for me, I'm still confused why Raya started both that game and the Villa game. He let in two absolute howlers, and when we signed him, the club, Arteta, made a statement saying that we would be having two number ones. Was I think the quote, or maybe I'm paraphrasing, but
He said something like that. Yeah.
yeah, said that we had two number ones, and it just doesn't seem that way. I genuinely like both guys. Like goalies make mistakes, some more than others. But it just doesn't seem that way. And then for him to get the start against Villa after that, which I know we'll talk about that game in a little bit, was just confusing for me. But thankfully, the guys in front of him, stepped up and outscored them. What was great and what I was happy to see was that our front three and our midfield three all had either an assist or a goal. And in Gabby Jesus's case, had one of each. I really don't think there's much to say besides that. We outplayed them. It's a game that, we should have won and did just that. And, I know that I've said that when we've played other bottom half teams so far this season. But yeah, I think that the teams that go far in the league and elsewhere are the ones that win the games that they should win. And that was one of them. So.
I know I've said this many times, and I think I may actually start doing a little bit of research into it, but what is up with Arsenal scoring goals after the allotted time that they give? This was another one. They had plus 6 minutes, and he scored in this 97th.
Yeah.
Just saying, that is the fourth time this season that I have brought this up that it has happened.
Well, I think that comes down to two things. One is just that club culture of never giving up that, some clubs just don't have, unfortunately. But
until we get to the end of the season, they're okay with backing it in.
But it's, I'm going to talk about that next game. But
okay, and to be fair, I wasn't really meaning a lot of banter in that.
I know it's one of the, and then the other part of it is that we possess the ball so much, especially late in the game, that I think it's genuinely tough for referees once you get past the actual extra time. If we're possessing it around the 18, you kind of got to wait until they make a back pass for the ref to blow the whistle. And we don't really do that. Once it gets to that point, we're continuing to make progressive passes and trying to cross the ball in. So it's another one of those things that whoever, it doesn't matter if it's our team or somebody else's, but they're going to get pissed if a team is possessing it in the final third and they make one pass slightly backwards at an angle towards the middle of the pitch maybe, and then the ref blows the whistle. People are going to go crazy at that. So it's a double-edged sword, I would say, in my opinion, with that. But at the end of the day, you don't stop playing until the whistle blows. And so I wish that my heart wasn't beating as fast as it was to potentially drop points to Luton. But like I said, Declan Rice is him.
Man, I was so disappointed when that goal went in.
You all were, dude. All of you had fucking text lined up, ready.
Oh, I was 100% did. 100% did. You were spot on with that.
Yeah. But we, you beat the teams you're supposed to beat. So
everyone should be allowed to celebrate late winners too. Here, by the way. So I was the first.
No matter who you play.
I agree completely, and I was the first person to say something just because there was a narrative around Spurs pretty early on that. They're doing laps of honor after beating Sheffield in a 94th minute. It was any of that stuff. You should just be allowed to celebrate.
It's the Premier League.
It's the Premier League. I agree completely.
It's not like it's a Carabao Cup where, we're playing Blackburn or
every game matters in the Premier League.
Totally.
Especially with how tight, I would say the race is at this point in the season right now. There's, what I don't even know. I would have to check the league, but I'm pretty sure it's between first Liverpool at 37 points and then United in sixth. It's only 10 points between potentially being out of Europe or getting being in the Conference League versus winning it. So
It's crazy. It's super close.
I like it that way, man.
Havertz has been getting points for you guys of recent. Is he like fighting for a starting role now, or you still see him as a bench guy?
I mean, he hasn't. Our midfield with Odegaard being injured, and at one point for a couple games and stuff like that, the whole season, I don't know what our clear midfield three is. It's kind of one of those St. Louis City things where like we've been mixing stuff around with like knocks here and there that we haven't. I don't think we've started a consistent three for more than in the midfield for more than 2 games in a row. But I'm happy that over the last month he's been finding form, and I think that that's kind of one of those things that everybody's been waiting for. And I'm just happy that he's stepping up and converting when he needed to.
If he could figure it out of like consistency, something that he does really well is making a late run into the box, specifically
back
at the
post.
Yeah, like doesn't need to like blow you away with speed. He's never going to be the guy that's going to push the ball past you and run around you, but like that late arriving run, like I don't know. I feel like Lampard used to do it all the time. Like for Chelsea, he'd be the last man into the box, but you would find him, and Kai's doing that really well. It's just not always onside. Number one, it's not always without his hand. Number two, and then number three, it's not always consistent. So I feel like as we transition into United Chelsea, Kai's kind of in this interesting space where like McTominay is as well, where like when you watch their whole body of work over a 90-minute period, or if they come off the bench or whatever it is, it's like it's not anything impressive. You're like, they're not the best player on the field, but they're putting the ball in the net, or they're getting an assist and they're making points happen. And it's hard to keep a guy like that off the field when in reality you have better midfielders who can control the game in those positions better. It's like this weird.
I think I agree, and I think it comes down to like, yeah, neither of these guys, for example, are like the stars on the team that like everybody thinks of when they think of the club, but they're just role players, and if a role player can do their role really, really well, then you're going to be successful, and when they step up when you need them, then you're going to be successful. And obviously, Scott did that for you guys.
Yeah, I feel like maybe you just like with the new day and age and all the transfers and the amount of money, like the luxury of being a role player doesn't exist anymore. Like you have Kai as like a role player that also costs like 80 million or whatever it is. Like how ridiculous is that? And United's full of them. Like United has plenty of
inflation, man.
I was gonna say it's inflation. That's the new price now.
I give it 10, 15 years, 80 million is going to be like
a steal.
Nothing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't look back on it and think that it's a steal, but like $80 million is going to be like a middle of the road transfer.
I was going to say $80 million nowadays isn't really getting you a superstar.
James Madison was 45, lads.
No, we're talking near.
Okay. Like,
I agree with you. Like right now. Yeah,
like 80's a ton.
Well, and yes, but there's also going to be steals like that too. Like I think he's an outlier in that had Tottenham or had anybody known how integral he was going to be to your guys' midfield this season pre-injury, then you guys probably would have ended up paying way more.
Absolutely, he's worth 80 now.
Sure is
for sure.
Speaking of a club that would have paid more, United and Chelsea. Let's talk about it. 2-1 victory for the boys in red at Old Trafford over the middle of the road Chelsea Football Club. Nick, do you want to start? You want me to start? What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. To be fair, there's not really much to talk about from our side of things. I don't know about you, Henry, and you can agree or disagree, but the first half I thought was some of the worst football I had seen in a very long time. Almost both parties. I think the score that it went into halftime 1-1 is laughable. I think it literally could have been 7-3 at halftime.
Wild.
Nico Jackson, laughable in my opinion. Like I think I texted you guys in the group message. There was at one point we had a 2-on-0 with Sterling and Nico Jackson, and I knew before they even got in the box that it was not going to be a goal.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's the state of the offensive mindset for Chelsea right now is atrocious, and I absolutely hate to watch it. I really don't. I think the only positive, if there is a positive, was Cole Palmer had a little 2-minute spell of brilliance, and he got us a goal. Which saved us going into halftime 1-1. And I was like, there's absolutely no possible way we could have a worse showing. And of course we did. There's not really much I can say. All your guys' talk about Enzo and Caicedo not performing, I completely agree with. They are valued probably at like $40 million, I would say, based on their performances right now.
I'd take either one. Bring them to United. Let's go.
Yeah, it just
right player, wrong system. You know.
Yep. Yeah. No. I think the Palmer goal was interesting. I think Onana's positioning was terrible. Like Onana should have saved that. But what I loved about it, I don't know if you all remember, like, do you remember back in like, what was it, 2012, 2013, Messi scored like 93 goals in the calendar year. And like so many of his goals were exactly what Cole Palmer did, cutting across the box and literally like passing it into the back post, just like out of reach from the keeper. Right when that went in, like that's like what came to mind. It was like a Messi goal. But I agree with you, bro. The first half could have been 5-5, 6-6, could have been crazy on both sides. It was
a really fun game to watch, to be honest.
Yeah, like I mean, I
didn't know what to expect, but I didn't expect that much energy.
It was so sloppy, like you guys said. Like I was thoroughly enjoying it, mostly because I didn't think anyone looked great. Like totally. United had something of an identity for the first time. Cole Palmer's finish was slick. Like the more I watched that over, the more impressed I was by that.
You talk about the Messi goals and how similar it was to that. Like I've always been such a fan because there's so much finesse and like under the radar talent that goes into scoring a goal like that. Like everybody sees the goals that go top bins or the crazy one-on-one moves and then chipping the keeper or whatever the case is. But like there's a lot of talent
the ability
that
to play
goes
it
into
at that pace and that out of reach.
Ridiculous. Yeah, it's so ridiculous. That, my friends, is something I can't do. Never been able to, never will.
Nick, the one thing you've mentioned a lot in the past that I noticed happened, Enzo was getting more up the field. I thought he had a couple pretty close opportunities that he should have just done a lot better with. And that seems to be the trend with him. Like
I also think that has to do with like the other people he's working with on his front three. Like I don't think any of them have confidence when they're
that's
going
true.
forward, not only in themselves but like in who they're passing to. Like I think like Enzo's dribbling and he's like, do I play it to Raheem Sterling or Nico Jackson? And like what are the odds that they're going to score that? Like, or do I force this in? Like I think I think there's so many thoughts that are going into these players as they're going into the box and into the final third, and it's a lot of it's confidence based, and I feel bad for him, but I agree with you. Like there was times when he would do some special things in the middle and then he'd get into the final third and then it's just like a deer in the headlights, don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's weird. Raheem Sterling continues his streak of never scoring against Manchester United, which is crazy. He's been around for years and years and years. It's never happened.
That's a wild
but from the United side, we haven't talked about United yet. I want to give major props to Antony. I thought that was the best performance in a United shirt from Antony. First half and second half, he was doing it on both sides of the ball. If he had a right foot, even a little bit,
remotely.
This much, dude. In the first half, there was.
Watch how we defended him too. Like,
well, in the first half, there was 2 opportunities where he was like on the right hand side, and, like in the box, and like instead of just taking it to his right foot and shooting across the box or even near post, he tried to cut it back. He literally could have had 2 goals if he just used his right foot a little bit. So that's frustrating, but I thought he was everywhere. Of course, McTominay is going to get the praise because he gets both goals, but I thought Antony was everywhere. I was really, really, really impressed with him. Of course, impressed with Garnacho once again. Bruno's penalty was terrible. He's like one of the most consistent penalty takers in the world, and that was horrendous.
Great.
And like, I mean, I think Hoove, you might have just said it, of like United looked like they had an identity for the first time all season,
was there.
Which was huge, because I want to remind you that like coming off of the weekend, there was all of the talks about like Ten Hag out and how he's lost the dressing room and how this and that and this and that. And then like the players show up against Chelsea looking like they want to fight for the manager. They want to fight for the club. He benched Rashford, like huge decision, stuff like that. And so I was like, fuck, this is going to be a turning moment for us. And it was a great game. I loved every bit of how we finished that game. I like was like yelling.
You were not happy about the first half as well, right?
No, bro. I mean, it was so wide open, but I mean, like for me, I'm like, at least we didn't like until the very end. I was like, at least we didn't concede one of those 7 chances that we could have. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Some of it was your fault, like you being Chelsea. Like some of it, like masters of your own like demise. But some of it, like United made great plays. Harry Maguire is coming off of a player of the month performance for the month of November, which is insane.
So wild you just said that.
Dude.
And it's a fact.
But we saw it in this game.
Almost.
We saw it in this game, but we really saw it against Bournemouth, which we'll talk about. But the issue with Harry Maguire is all of the issues we've talked about. Like he's slow coming out of the back. He can't play a high line. He's, doing all this stuff. The issue is he made a couple of massive blocks and has for the last couple of games, like really gotten himself in good positions. But the problem is that he's only in those positions because he's slow. Yeah. He's out of place. He can't be different places. Lindelof got yanked at half, and maybe it was an injury. We don't know. But Lindelof was all over the goddamn park because Harry Maguire was 5 yards off the rest of the back four. So it's like, we talk about the Maguire-Lindelof partnership and how horrendous it's been for years. It's like, I feel like Lindelof has to overplay 1,000,000% whenever he's playing next to Maguire. So we looked great against, or we didn't look great. I'm stoked that we came out with a 2-1 win. Dobes literally texted me after the game being like, thank God for that, because now we have at least some breathing room on the pod for the next couple of weeks because we didn't lose to Chelsea. But yeah, overall, like you're only as good as your next game. And I think that, we showed that when we went out against Bournemouth. So yeah.
I was just going to say something that you've been saying for a while, and my only real good United take on this is I thought Garnacho against us looked spectacular, and I've been saying it for a while. It also could have been because he was going up against Cucurella at first, and I was like, oh, this is just embarrassing. But even when Reece James came on, I thought
put him on skates.
He still looked dangerous. I mean, Reece slipped on that one.
Well,
that video, I was expecting way more out of that video the second time I watched it, because in real life I was like, oh, he turned him. But I watched it back. I was like, wow, it was all right.
Well, even in the first half
it's all right.
Antony's side and like Colwell's side, people were slipping right and left, literally like in that corner of the pitch, Chelsea's like defensive left side, people were slipping right, left, and center. Like, I mean, it was crazy. And so like when that happened, when I watched it live, I was like, this is going to get cut up so badly. But to your point, Garnacho, what I appreciate about him is he just takes people on all the time, and he's not afraid to do it. And that's what we need out of a winger. We don't need just someone to pass backwards. But Hoover, your week was up and down, but starting with the down before we get to the up, talk to us about your midweek game. We had a 1-2 loss against West Ham after a Romero banger of a goal. It was good to see. But then 2 goals led up in the second half. Weird
goals. It was probably one of the more aggravating ones I've seen this year. And the theme has always been from Ange that like we're losing these games because we don't take our chances offensively. Like these types of goals, these, semi loose at the back, hand over goals out of possession thing, that's not going anywhere.
Mhm.
That's the blueprint actually. So um, it was frustrating because you see the reverse side of it from this weekend. We'll leave that out, but they were not putting balls in the net, and West Ham held them really well. And I mean, the goals couldn't have been bigger flukes. Like
Yeah,
the
both of them.
one off the post, and again, they were out of mistakes from the back line. It was good to have Romero back. You could see that there was a lot more confidence in the back line and just being with the ball. I hate playing West Ham. I just don't like West Ham that much. It's always a cagey match. They always kind of bring you down to their level. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it was like our third home loss in a row.
Mhm.
We'd only pulled 1 point from the last five, which was literally Man City away. So, it's like what do you take from that? You're losing the games you shouldn't. You're, showing up against the champions with the same style of play and no center backs. Like
Mhm.
like you have to pick who you're going to be for the rest of the year, and it didn't feel like they showed up that day. So, um, yeah, it was a frustrating one. I don't know if anyone else even saw much of it. It
Well,
was middle of the day
yeah, I
Thursday.
watched the game, and one thing that I want to say is like the commentators can get the fuck out of here. I was like
Yeah.
texting you about it. It was like on that second goal where like
Yeah.
Udogi like lost the ball, passed it back, whatever, and then Vicario came out and like slid at the ball, and the commentators literally said, I texted it to you. What was it? It was like Vicario needs
He's got to
to
be quicker there. He's got to
he's
be
got to be
quicker out
quicker.
off his line.
He's got to not be afraid to get kicked in the face there. He has to put his body on the line. And I was like,
Dude,
excuse me.
they
Like,
haven't watched this man play all year.
yeah, I was
Because
like,
that's kind of what he
you have to
does.
not be afraid to get kicked in the face. Are you kidding me?
It was
Uh,
ridiculous.
yeah, but it was ridiculous. And like we don't have to spend too much time like on this one because I think that we can transition really well into like your victory against Newcastle because I feel like we saw two different teams from Spurs. In the way that they played the game and kind of the bounces that went their way. Not saying that the 4 goals that they scored were any bit lucky or anything like that, but every team pretty much like with the exception of the City and Liverpool teams of the last couple of years, every team kind of goes through these like seasons. It's like a game of basketball. Sometimes the team goes on a 12-0 stretch and it just is part of the game. You just know that that's going to happen. And similarly, sometimes that's just part of this season. So you all come out and spank Newcastle 4-1. Like what was the biggest difference like between those games and like what you saw?
Um, a lot more individual performances that were better, but mostly when your star player shows up to play the game, and they put in a performance, it's a lot easier for everyone else to play well. Like
For
Sonny
a
showing
second,
up.
I thought you were meaning Richarlison.
I thought you
Me
were.
too,
I was
dude.
like, bro,
Wait, no, son.
let's
I was like,
go.
please don't.
Yeah.
Did not have I did so I said this in the group, did not have a Richarlison double on my bingo card for this year, or really many out games in general. That was electric. Love seeing the chicken dance, the pigeon dance. I drink it alive. I think it's the best thing ever. But yeah, Sonny showed up, dude. Sonny had Trippier on skates the entire game. He was the direct architect of the first two goals. Um, other players to shout out were Pedro Porro and Destiny Udogie, the right and left back, who were combining through the middle to get the ball to Sonny. Like
Like
I
it ain't no
still haven't,
thing.
I still haven't really wrapped my head around like how they're even able to do that. Like I feel like I understand tactics to a certain level, and it's just so balls to the wall all the time, and it's fun. When you do it like that, when you take your chances, it was literally the exact opposite of West Ham, to where West Ham capitalized on their two or three situations, but Ben Davies gets a toe in on an open net to Isak and deflects it away for a goal kick. Like that didn't happen in the West Ham game. They tucked those. So when you get 2-0, when you go into half 2-0 up, it's going to be a lot easier for you to play the next half 2-0 up. That you keep the pressure on. That's what Ange has, preached this whole time. That's the biggest difference. Like West Ham scored their goal 1-1 at half, and then you don't come out and immediately get one or get close to getting one, and they get another one. The game's deflated. You've lost your edge. Whereas, Pedro Porro dime ball to Richie, 2-touch, sketchily, very Darwin-esque, slots one home. 3-0, it's like game's done. Like you could see it on the Newcastle end of things. They were so dangerous. Spurs were just like attack after attack after attack. Brendan
Basuma's
Johnson,
quality.
Basuma's quality. He looks better with Pap Sarr next to him too.
Yeah.
I think he's a lot more comfortable with young Pepe in there than any of the other guys. And it looked
He puts in a tackle.
Dude, he's almost Romero-esque. He's a lot smarter.
I was gonna say
about his tackles, but every once in a while he's got a howler in him too. But it's tough. He's a physical dude. There's quality in the side, and you can see it. And even with injuries, it doesn't matter who's going to be on the field. Obviously, you want Ange is going to have them doing this style. So, is it sustainable? Who knows? I think Pedro Porro is a player. I think he's getting better and better every week too, and he's creative, and he's a wing back that's playing on the inside. Like I kind of love everything about him, as personal opinion.
Yeah.
But it's so. I mean, that's Spurs. Like the contrast of the two games that we just had. One feels sustainable, and one feels that they could do it every week and would churn out really really good results week in week out. They also blew a goal lead in their previous 4, so it is a little bit Spursy. I'm going to try and escape that term for my entire life, but I'm not going to.
I feel like this is kind of like a different Spurs though. Like I don't feel. And maybe like I'm deluded just because like I like watching Ange and what he's doing, but like I feel like last year we threw that term around. I feel like weekly, like we're like they're just being Spursy. It just is the way that it is. I feel like this year like that actually might be like one of the first uses of that phrase this entire season. To see that, and like they're sitting in 5th, like even with some of these really poor
I'd be thrilled for 5th.
You would.
Yeah, and he's been in the job the same amount of time as Poch.
Yeah,
and like we're not even thinking about how little time he's had. He didn't even have a full preseason. Then he lost the best striker in the world.
Yeah,
like that's really 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 impressive. And with the personnel he had, obviously Mickey Van de Ven Vicario changed the team completely.
Mm-hmm.
But that was really all the business that happened. Those were the only 2 guys he got in.
Madison too.
Madison too. Yeah. But Madison would have been perfect in any manager's side within the system. But it's like for the first time I have belief in a manager. Even when we were losing, dude. Even when we were losing, you could tell that he was pissed off after the West Ham game. I was pissed off. Everyone was really pissed off. We thought we threw it away, but like there was a response.
Yep.
And they made it happen at home. And Newcastle's good. They're riddled with injuries too. So, but I don't feel like that even needs to get thrown out there because
everyone
they're in the Champions League. Everyone's got injuries. Like, blow me on that one. So, I love beating Newcastle. Especially the way that they did. The ignorance I've kind of felt from, some of their fans. Like even just watching that video of the fan yelling at Trips at St. James, that was bold as hell, bro. Bold as hell. But I enjoyed this. I enjoyed that one.
Yeah, I was stoked to watch that. I was excited to watch a Newcastle demise as well. And y'all are playing great football. It's entertaining as hell whenever it's working.
Jamie Carragher tweeted it. He said, "Spurs are playing great football. So fun to watch."
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, dude.
You said sure.
Yeah.
Fellas, another team that we just have to talk about. I feel like we can't keep going on in this podcast week in and week out and not talk about Villa. Another team that is fun to watch. And they came off their double week this week with 2 massive results. 2 wins against Arsenal and Manchester City, 1-0 victories in both. Now, it's not like it came out of nowhere in the sense like last year, We talked a lot about them. We saw what Unai Emery was doing in the season preview podcast that we had of like where we thought that some of these teams were going to finish. A lot of us had them either in our top 4 or top 6. Like we had a couple of these guys really making an impact, and that's what they've done so far. Lucas, I'm obviously going to throw it over to you to talk about the 1-0 loss for you, but Jen's like definitely got to give credit where credit's due. Villa are a real threat. They're sitting in 4th right now, and they deserve it every bit of the way.
They beat Spurs away before the City game too, 2-1.
Yeah.
Like that's really ridiculous. 9 points from 3.
Yes, especially with the opposition. Like, United, those 3 teams in a row are on my schedule. I'm like, fuck, we'll see what happens, and they took 9 points. So Winks, talk to us.
Yeah.
How was the game?
Yeah, I mean,
welcome back to the chat.
Thanks, brother.
Dude.
Tough loss to a good team. I was gonna echo that.
Media training right there.
Thank you. Yeah, just gutted.
Just gutted.
Absolutely gutted. No. Yeah, I was gonna lead with that and echo it that at the beginning of the season I predicted they were going to be top 4, and I know that several others of us did too. And at the moment, they are absolutely playing like a top 4 team. Dare I say, even a title contender, if that's a hot take. But if you can beat the big teams, and then beat the teams that you should beat, I don't see why there isn't an opportunity there for you again with how close the table is right now. But regardless of us dominating the game on paper, it comes down to who can take advantage of chances when they get them, big or small. And Zinchenko was, caught out of position for one of the few times this year. I might add, he's been historically this year great
Zinchenko
on both sides of the ball, but McGinn took advantage of that, and I don't really think that it was savable. So even if Ramsdale had gotten the start that game, which he should have, I don't know that he saves that goal. But I am genuinely disappointed because it would have been a statement game with how hot they've been, and I'm disappointed because I do think we were the better team. But for me, we need to start much, much, much faster in general. Too many goals. Last season we were the team that came out of the gates absolutely flying, would try and, score 1 or 2 in the first 20 minutes. And this season, it feels like we're the complete opposite. Letting up goals in the first half of the first half and then trying to bail ourselves out, towards the end of the game or, even in extra time, as Nikki mentioned earlier, when we pass teams to death. But it can't be like that because, there are going to be teams that sit in a low block better than others and just don't allow us to get good opportunities to get shots on target. And it also can't be like that against these teams that, like Aston Villa, that counter so well and press so well, because there's bound to be an error, or a player out of position. And that's exactly what happened early on in the game. So just have to be better if we want to contend for trophies in any competition. I will say we had a foul not get called and then a goal disallowed. And I know, Henry, you and I were hanging out watching the game together. And at first I was like, no shot, they're calling that a handball. And then watched the replay back, and it was a handball, by whatever unclear definition we have of it. But the ball
definition where like the ball hit his hand leading to the goal.
Was that the one where there were like 4 different handballs?
Yeah.
I literally
I did watch it several times, and it only hit his hand. So it was
it only hit his hand twice. It's not really that big.
It only hit it once, but it came across and he hit it like with his shoulder and then his chest, and then but his hand was up here, so he like shouldered it. Then it hit his chest, and as he was lowering his arm, the ball just kind of like dropped and hit off the back of his hand. And so it's one of those things that, it's just unlucky. Like, it's not like he was purposely trying to move the ball to his feet or had his hand way out of position. Like it was in a good position, and just genuinely unlucky the way that it just kind of like pinballed down from his shoulder to his chest down to his hand. And
It was a CYC Sunday special.
Bro.
Bundle it in the back post.
Yeah.
And hope they can call it.
I mean, but like Henry said, like that's where Kai has been.
That's what he said.
Doing well, and so the fact that he's like in that position is a good sign. Again, unlucky hand placement there, but but earlier on in the game, Douglas Luiz had a tackle on Gabriel Jesus in the box, and didn't get called a foul, which is tough. Ball's above both of their heads. They're both turning for it. Luiz kicks the back of Jesus's like leg, ankle, when he beats him to it. And it's one of those things that it goes back to like, I guess it's not VAR specific because the ref didn't call it a penalty on the field, but there's just like an inconsistency. And again, we all four as individuals tend to hone in on it more when it happens to our club. That's just like how it is. But if you're not going to call it a foul, don't call it a foul at all. But if you're going to call it a foul all the time. I've seen, tackles exactly like that happen in other parts of the pitch, and it gets called a foul this season. Mm-hmm. So I have to wonder whether it's like because it happened in the box, is it like are refs more hesitant to make a call like that, especially in a close game? But it's like a very similar situation to, and I can't believe I'm not really defending him, but same situation as Romero's red going studs up, and then we saw that other tackle. Kai made the same, not the same, but a similar tackle. Didn't
say the same.
Didn't get a red, but it's like if you're going to call it a foul, then call it a foul everywhere. If you're not, then don't. But you just like be consistent, because that's what's more frustrating than anything, and why when that foul happened, I was like, dude, that's a pen. I've seen the same shit happen, both in the box, midfield, whatever, this season. And, with it not getting called, I'm just like, I don't know what to expect if, you've got 5 or 6 of the same tackles and, 3 of them are getting called a foul and 2 are not.
Totally.
All because of where it is on the field. So that's what's like super frustrating to me. But again, in a game where on paper we dominated almost every category and shouldn't have lost, I can't be complaining about two calls that didn't get made that could have potentially led to goals. I think that with we had 4, 5, 6 really good opportunities to put the ball in the back of the net. I know that Martinelli had a great cross to Saka on his right foot, back post early on in the game that he just couldn't connect with, but there were a ton of opportunities for us to score, and we just didn't. So I'll leave it at that. I think that, we have PSV tomorrow on Tuesday. So I'm hoping that we can, get some positive momentum as we head into, was it Brighton this weekend, I think.
Yeah, I guess like you mentioned it earlier, but like it feels like the league's a little bit wide open right now, especially in that top 4. Like, yes, Liverpool are at the top, but it's not like they're 10 points clear. Like, it's all there for the taking. Failed to mention in your analysis of the game, your former player, Emi Martinez, standing on his goddamn head, making numerous saves, just being the freak that he is, and all of the antics, all of the mind games, all of everything, man.
Is he the best goalie in the Premier League right now?
I feel like maybe consistency for this season. Like, I mean, I think Alisson's the best goalkeeper in the Prem, but this season he's had numerous like howlers where he's like made mistakes. Emi I feel like he's just so consistent. He's not.
You're going to get.
Yeah, he's not without mistakes, but like he doesn't seem to make
the brains that he has when he's coming out, when not to, like the knowledge of footy, like when he plays a long ball, when he like
that's a lot of that stuff isn't necessarily stuff you can teach to. It's just like absolutely as a keeper, he's got that soccer IQ that like if he had the talent that Alisson has, the shot stopping ability, he'd be a contender for one of the best of all time.
Yeah, totally. Well, we'll transition to United having an absolute stinker against Bournemouth. What a disappointing game.
Not everybody can do it at Old Trafford, but Bournemouth, who was it? Crystal Palace can?
Yeah, they sure can.
Crazy.
Not everyone can, but it seems like the majority can, It's not everyone. Like, it's not Chelsea, for example, but like most teams can at the current moment. Man, we had a stinker holistically bad. I don't.
It looks great. Bournemouth looks great.
Yeah, of course. Like they did. Like they took their chances. Some of their like passages of play. The finish from Solanke, that first goal.
He's so good.
I mean, what a terrible, terrible tracking from our two center backs. Like Shaw literally just stick out your foot. Harry didn't even try to mark the guy. Amrabat let whoever it was, I think it was like Cook, the center midfielder, just through the middle to play that ball in. Like Amrabat like just didn't track him at all. Like just stupid shit that happened right away. That we're like, okay, 5 minutes in, we're now chasing this game, which is ridiculous. And like, we just couldn't get anything going. I did think that it was a little bit of an interesting shout, and maybe it's because he's resting him for midweek with Champions League, but I thought it was interesting to go with Martial instead of Højlund. I thought it was interesting to go with Amrabat and McTominay instead of Mainu. And like, I just thought that it just wasn't the right blend. Luke Shaw had one of his worst games in a Manchester United shirt.
I was just about to mention, because you liked him being in that left side.
Loved him.
Yeah.
He looked off it from minute one, and it just never got better. And he even got yanked in the 80th, which doesn't really happen all that much with him. Got yanked and threw in Johnny Evans because I think Ten Hag was just so frustrated with what they were doing. And like, to some extent, I wouldn't have started that 11. I would have made a couple of changes, especially for Mainu and Højlund. But like Ten Hag, man, you set up the game, you throw out the strategy, and then your players just don't mark up on the back post. Like it's the same thing with Wan-Bissaka falling asleep at the back post last week. Like Ten Hag is not to blame for that, and it's just so disappointing that we go from the Chelsea game where you're like, finally an identity, here we go, we're like on a roll, and then they show up with literally like one of the worst performances I've seen them play. And what was crazy too is like, I was watching the game, and every goal that went in, I was like, of course that happened. Like, we're playing like shit, we have no fight in us, of course it happened. And like, I've had games where I've been like so mad I want to like kick my TV and break it. I think I was just like, I was honestly like, I was embarrassed. It was like as if you just like pulled my pants down in front of a crowd of people. Like I was really embarrassed watching the game.
I feel like that's
we're
basically
just
what Bournemouth did.
To give you.
It's kind of did do that.
Yeah, I mean that's what happened. But like
cherries showing off their cherries.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying, baby. Come on now. But yeah, you look across the board. I know that FOTMob isn't everything, but you see, you know, Bruno with an 8.0, Antony with 7.2, but you know, and Reguilon had a 7.2, but everyone else is well below that. Which is terrible. And then Bruno fucks around and gets a yellow card, and he's out for our next game.
Oh, dude! Like, and it was on some dumb shit, like
stupid shit. Idiot, and so, bro. Like, not only is it Liverpool, which like no need to remind you is what 7-0 last year. Like, so we're going and playing this like super hard game against the people at the top of the league, and now our captain is suspended. So it's like, I couldn't even predict this lineup if I wanted to. It's probably going to be like Amrabat, Mainu, Scott as the number 10. Like, it's just going to be ridiculous. So what an embarrassing performance. And as a United fan, like we were playing Bayern midweek, which we all know the form that Bayern's in. And like, it's a must-win game for us.
They lost to Frankfurt 5-1.
Oh, they did.
There's a chance.
Dobes said on the record in the chat he can't be here tonight, but he said what 3-1
United.
I hope so, man. It's a must-win for us to like stay in Europe, not just the Champions League, for us to like not get bounced out of the Europa League too. So
how does that work?
Because like the Europa League, you have to finish third, and if we don't win, we're fourth. And like just not really
underneath Copenhagen.
At least you don't have to scroll to see you guys.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's still something, but it's the tale of two things. You know, like what I want to remind myself for like for perspective is that like United has played like pretty okay at times this season, and they've played atrociously as we saw against Bournemouth, and we're still sitting in sixth, like 3 points off this Tottenham team that we all have talked about how much we love watching them, and we're 6 points off of City, which is, you know, a pretty crazy thing. So it just speaks to how wide open the league is as well. But it was a terrible showing, an embarrassing showing, and I'm hoping that we don't capitulate midweek. So we'll finish up our week recap with the Everton boys. A 2-0 dismantling of the Chelsea Football Club. A game that we saw.
2-0 dismantling.
A game that we saw a team that might be bottom of the league because of a point deduction. Nope, they are in 17th, which is 5 points away from you. So just as a reminder, Chelsea is currently sitting in 12th place at 19 points. Everton is in 17th place with 13 points with a 10-point deduction. So think about that. They're 6 points. You're 6 points ahead of them, and they had a 10-point deduction. So that's kind of crazy. And then we saw comments after this game that Pochettino was calling for more signings, as if the 500 to 700 million spent is not enough.
Did he really say that? Was that like,
oh yeah,
yeah, he did.
Somewhere?
Oh yeah, no, post match interview saying that they need more signings.
We need to make some changes in January.
Yeah, when our injury list is 20 something people deep, and we haven't.
I say they just anybody who's injured, just fucking drop them.
We haven't had the same starting lineup 2 weeks in a row, and we have no other competitions in the Premier League. So that just shows where we're kind of at as far as personnel goes. We're supposed to have.
Why are they getting hurt though? You guys aren't in Europe.
I've been
You're
saying
playing less games
from the beginning. Chelsea's training staff
Believe
needs
me,
to get freaking changed out because
have to, bro. Like it's not. It's
yeah, you're right.
It's a joke. Reece James plays at 26 minutes, finally back from a red card, and he has to come off. Like,
I do think that the Reece James thing is a little bit niche, though. Like
it is, but it also like we have 20-something injuries, huh? Like,
yeah.
And
well, you have 10.
Only playing in the Prem.
10 injuries.
Oh,
pump the brakes.
But your bench is still stacked with a lot of pounds.
10 injuries. That it's not
a
10.
lot of dull hairs.
It is 10. I just counted them.
Name them right now. I'll give you more.
You'll give me more than 10? Yeah. Okay, give me 1 sec. I just had it. Let's see. I have my list. Fofana, Chalobah, Lavia, Madueke, Bettinelli, Gusto, Leslie, Nkunku, Chukwuemeka, and Ben Chilwell.
James Sanchez.
Oh, did they get injured during that game?
Yes.
So 12, but 10 going into that game. Yeah. So, yeah.
Neither is 20, I believe.
Okay, it's an over-exaggeration.
People add them up
fucking injuries compared to all you guys.
22, technically.
Everton are like, roll,
speaking
bro.
of, Everton's sick.
Yeah. Everton are good. Like they're deiching it.
Hey,
they put it to Newcastle too. Like they've won a couple in a row, and the story at Goodison is so electric to me. Love it.
Speaking of good, Decore, he's in the top 10, I think, for goals scored this season in the Prem. Huh?
Dude, who's the other guy? Dwight McNeil.
Making it Dwight, just making it happen.
Making it happen, dude. He's been around the block.
Do we think that whenever Chelsea loses games like this, is it more so that like Chelsea is just really bad, or is it like Everton played really well and deserved it? So like Bournemouth, for example. Bournemouth played us off the park. Like, we played terribly, but like we've also played terribly and beaten teams. Bournemouth destroyed us. So is this one Everton played super well and they outplayed Chelsea? Is that the story here?
I don't think it was. Chelsea had chances. Like, Chelsea always seemed to create chances. Whether or not they can lock down the back, which has apparently been the issue, like, you guys just don't finish your opportunities.
Is it time for Thiago Silva to retire after this season?
I do
agree with that 100%, but he also didn't start in this game, so or play.
Okay, no banter. Definitely not coming from the Spurs fan either. But what's the temperature check on Poch? Like,
I've said this from the beginning. I think he has a lot of shit that he's dealing with right now in this Chelsea side. I'm not saying he should have it figured out by now. I also want to give him an entire year. We haven't given a manager an entire year yet, and we've consistently been sitting in 12th and 10th place. So obviously we need to switch something up, and I hope they give him an entire year, even maybe next year as well, to at least give us an identity. And if it sucks, then we can blame it on him, and then we can move forward and try and find a better manager. Like right now, you guys have said it week in and week out, Chelsea Football Club, like we have a culture and this identity of like ingrained into our system in the last like year and a half, 2 years. And like, we're just like shoveling managers out and wingers out like it's nothing because we can't find the net. And like at some point, like I'm hoping someone's going to finally figure it out and we're going to give them the length of time to figure it out. I'm also hoping some of these injuries, like in Cuckoo, maybe like, I don't know. Like,
yeah, you need a spark.
Right spot.
I was so excited to see him in the Prem
Me
too.
too.
It was shitty.
Me too.
I'm hoping maybe that's it. We'll see. But I hope that we give Poach a year. Like I'm not sold on him. We at least need to give him.
I feel like for like
an opinion on him. Like right now, it's like I feel like this is still Chelsea, like trying to get out from the mud right now. And like once we do, I think then I can judge a manager. Like I really.
Yeah, it's almost like what do you want him to say? It's like Chelsea's playing like shit. So like. Again, not to make this about like United, but like frame of mind that I'm in right now is like, so people are like calling for Ten Hag out for people, but I'm like, but what's the alternative? Like the alternative is you bring in a new manager. They're given like no money again. They have this club that they inherited that they didn't bring in, and then they have to like try to implement their system. I kind of agree with that logic for Poch as well of like, if he is your guy, you got to at least give him to the end of the season to try to work this shit out. Like, what I can't quite figure out, it was the same thing with Potter though. Like Potter lasted what, like 7 months, 8 months in the season before it went to Frank. But like you have 7, 8 months and you can't improve anything. Like that is what's a little.
There's been no identity. That's the kicker because I've seen this, I've been there, I've done this, even with this specific manager. But like there's not been anything super positive to build on yet, even through the younger guys. And like obviously he's had to do so much rotation and it's hard to instill this stuff, but to me it still feels like this is all kind of Bowley's fault. Like he put Poch in a room with a bunch of really young talent and he was expected to immediately be able to make this culture change. And my comparison is Ange, because there's way less new faces, new, kids. There's not been a ton of money involved. There's not been a ton of transfers. You kind of still had the same core guys who were like, okay, we want to rally around something. Whereas Chelsea's got a ton of random people from different places, and they're expected to put it together. So that's where I'm with you 100%.
We have like we don't have any club legends or like club veterans in our.
No, there's no
really like
not a lot of
Conor Gallagher.
Yeah.
Conor Gallagher maybe, but like Conor's young as shit, and like. Yeah, we have a bunch of youngsters, but like, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Right now, watching us play is not fun. I don't enjoy watching us play at all.
Gallagher might be in a Spurs uni in January too.
That's what we're hearing.
I don't rumors are swirling, and it's coming from ESPN FC, so.
Both of us have the same reaction to it. It's not. That's a lame transfer. We're both just going like.
I mean, you talk about transfers, and we're not going to dive into it on this episode, but it is the 11th of December at time of recording, and it is a little surprising that there haven't been more transfer rumors, or at least from what I'm seeing. Like typically at this time, like I mean, it's exploding on Twitter. Fabrizio is normally like blowing up timelines, and like there just hasn't really been a whole lot. Really with anyone. Like I haven't seen any big transfer rumors. Typically at this time we're like, oh, definitely so-and-so is going here. So we'll see. So that's our weekend recap. Chelsea are shit. Rest of us are trying to figure it out.
It's really interesting because obviously I was telling you guys earlier, my girlfriend just recently moved in. So like trying to convert her into a Chelsea fan, I've been having to just like, babe, we'll be good at one point. I swear to God, this time we'll be good. Give us time. Because week in and week
Just
out,
trust
she's like, she literally is like, so did Chelsea lose again? And I'm like,
That's
yeah.
a bad
Hey, brother,
question,
you and
bro.
I have similar situations on that front. So,
Yeah, same. Like Paige sometimes is like, "Oh,
Yeah,
they
guys,
lost again," and
same.
you're like, "Lucas."
Thank you.
Gentlemen, we have some St. Louis City news. We have a transaction that happened.
Na 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 na
We're seeing
na
two
na
players
na.
leave. We're saying goodbye and thank you for your service to Jared
Goodbye.
Stroud and Lucas Bartlett. And incoming, we have Chris Durkin, who is a center midfielder, primarily center defensive midfielder that can play anywhere on in the center and on the right hand side of the pitch. So, initial reactions to this, because it's been a minute since we've had St. Louis City news. So, initial reactions.
I'm gonna say it. Sorry, boys. Gotta say it. I am thrilled to see Mr. Stroud gone. I am absolutely thrilled.
Lucas, thoughts?
I think they both needed to go. You know, from what we had heard as far as rumors, you know, Bartlett wasn't the best in the locker room, and you never want any of those guys on your team. From what I understand, you know, Stroud wasn't that guy, but we saw him, you know, on the field and just didn't really fit the way that we played or the way that we wanted to play. And so I, you know, obviously didn't watch Durkin a whole lot this year, but you know, excited to see what he can bring, but also having another center defensive mid, even if he can really play anywhere in the midfield, makes me wonder exactly how we'll line up next year. You know, is Blom going to Europe? You know,
Well, it's something we talked about, like I think on the last episode, as a position that we need. Like I
Totally.
And I'm pumped that we got that, especially because I think we also mentioned like Lowen, like giving him more freedom. Like I think this allows and more freedom for him to play offensively.
Personally, like my initial reaction was I was shocked. I was shocked that Stroud was part of that deal.
I was too.
I was not surprised at all that Bartlett got moved on. Like I think we saw it all the way back in like February, or not February. Sorry, I got my months mixed up. But we saw like a couple of months ago he kind of got dropped from the lineup, never really made his way back to the lineup. Saw that coming from a mile away. If I would have guessed which of our wingers got moved on, Stroud literally would have been at the bottom of my list just because of how much he played last season, especially as it got to the business end of the season. It felt like he was Cardinals' go-to guy. I was incredibly surprised by that move.
I agree.
But also sometimes some of these teams that are, you know, trying to sign guys or put them in deals, I feel like they're more likely to pick players, you know, good, bad, or otherwise decent that they were able to watch more film on.
That's true.
Versus like a winger of ours that, you know, maybe played a couple games. Like it's a lot tougher sell.
I know what they're going to
get. A team to want to sign them when they don't know what they're going to get.
Yeah, I just like feel like, you know, when we did our season recap and we talked about those areas of the field that we needed to address, wingers was like one of our first positions. And like a lot of us said, like, hey, like maybe Stroud isn't cutting it as our out and out starter, but like off the bench, throw him on the last 20 minutes. Like that's fine. It's depth in that position. I was just incredibly surprised with it. So Durkin coming in, I, you know, immediately started like, you know, searching who this guy is. He grew up in the USA system, played overseas, I want to say in Belgium for a year or two in his like 18 and 19-year-old season. He's only like 20 years old, scored 2 bangers for DC this year. But he's like a defensive midfielder, can play a long ball when he needs to. But when I look at our starting lineup right now, you're putting Blom, Leuven, and Durkin hopefully into the starting lineup. You don't know. It'd be weird to make a move that isn't going into the starting lineup. But like at the end of the season, Leuven came out in that interview and said that he likes playing the number 8 role or the number 6 role. And Durkin is that. So I'm like just very confused with, like you said, Nick, like what happens to the starting lineup. But who knows, you know, like we don't have a peek behind the curtain. We don't know what's going on inside of the club, but like this move for me, like them making this move definitely tells me that there's more moves to be
Oh
made
yeah.
in this offseason. If they went out and just signed like an out and out striker, or excuse me, an out and out winger or an out and out like wing back, I could be like, okay, maybe we're not doing too much business because that's kind of what we need. This move tells me we're dealing.
I think we get another center mid if I'm being completely honest. Like I think this was
Do you?
I think it was a depth type move. Like I know you said he like kind of immediately goes into the starting lineup, but like I don't know. I think it was kind of like we're getting some of our lengthier depth players off and getting another depth in a different position. Was
Well,
kind of
like
how I looked at it.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't have a big enough sample size of like looking
True.
at this guy's like body of work over the season. I just wasn't watching DC. Like, I
It's
watched them
also
a
our
couple of
first, like,
times.
it's our first MLS like transfer
Totally.
too. So like I don't know like what like the aspect of like some of these like are they doing these just for roster moves or is this like actually they want these players and they're fitting their system? Like I have no
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, and so like I don't know, just like from the outside looking in, I would hope that if we made a move like that, that Durkin would go into our starting lineup. And if he's just a depth player, like I'd just be surprised that we
Got
gave up one of our consistent starters for that. Um, but yeah, now we look at the move and we say who else is coming in, and hopefully that leads to like another exciting couple of weeks because it's not too much longer now to where we do like the Champions Cup drawing and we start really picking up those games in like January, February. So it's right around the corner, which is kind of crazy to say. But also like just kind of like a weird as fuck thing. And this is just my opinion. You tell me if you disagree. I think it's wild that we did that deal and then they didn't post anything like on social media saying like thank you Jared Stroud, thank you Lucas Bartlett, especially because they were such a big part of the season. They were such a big part of like the first campaign. Like I'm just surprised that like St. Louis typically on social has like done really classy moves all season long, and just to like make a move like that and then not say anything, I'm like very taken back by that.
I agree, and that's why and to be fair, I think that's why it kind of played into my thought of like this was like a depth slash just a roster move that like we wanted to make pretty quickly instead of like this is a long thought out transfer.
It's a big thing. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's why I was kind of thinking that as well because you are right. I had to like I didn't even realize it had happened. I had like heard in passing at dinner that like Stroud had been moved, and I was like, I haven't seen anything on this.
Yeah, like Jobs texted us, and it was like on Twitter, and it like wasn't even like an official
Twitter
club
a
statement.
little bit to like find the trade, and I was like, wow, like this is definitely like on the low. But like I have nothing against the man, but like I think he was played too much in our system, and he wasn't the right fit. And I think he needed to go.
Yeah. Well, I feel like in the next 2-3 weeks, we're going to see a lot more moves from St. Louis, and hopefully we see a lot more moves. But gentlemen, I'm going to finish with a factor cap for the night. It's been a minute since we've done factor caps, and at time of recording, I want to read off the league table. Liverpool in first with 37, Arsenal in second with 36, Villa in third with 35, City in fourth with 33. Tottenham in fifth with 30, United in sixth with 27th, Newcastle in seventh with 26. So the top of that and the bottom of that, so 1 through 7 is separated by 11 points. So my statement is Manchester City finish outside the top 4.
Cap. And that's just pure instinct off of that answer. I'm going to be honest, as you were listing through those names and you were listing the teams, when you got to City, I thought in my head that they are still probably my favorite to win the league right now. Like,
even 4 points back?
Yes, even 4 points back. And like, I don't even think they're playing that good of football right now. I think the league is so up in the air, and I think there's the most consistent thing I can step on is Pep Guardiola and his ability to win titles. So I like, it was funny as you were reading that list, I was like, I still would pick City to win the league right now. And then, so yeah, I definitely think they finish in the top 4.
Top 4?
Yeah.
Lucas?
I think it's a cap too. I think they finished top 4. You know, KDB, their best player, their architect has been out this entire first half of the season, and you know I'm pretty sure he comes back early in the year for the second half of the season.
Soon.
So, having him back, and them still being in fourth obviously shows how deep they are, but they've dropped a lot of points without him that with him I don't think that they would normally drop. So I think that, they'll find their groove unfortunately when he comes back. And yeah, I don't see there's a way that they could finish outside the top four, especially with him back. I think that they're gonna be playing with a chip on their shoulder, especially against the teams that took points from them in the first half of the season. But having one of their captains back.
I also feel like we saw it last year. City not in first is dangerous. Like them fighting to scratch back at the top of the table, like that's exactly where they want to be.
Yeah, and part of me wants to say fact, or maybe they just sit at fourth. Maybe they finish the season in fourth. But because when I think about Liverpool, Arsenal, and Villa, it's not that I don't think that they're not going to drop points. I think they will. I think that that's part of it. Tottenham, as we know, they're 3 points behind City, and they're still two of their best players are injured. They're coming back too. That's going to happen at some point. And then you have United, who's still injured. We're not playing great football by any means, but we're 6 points behind City. There's still games to push, and this Newcastle team can show up and beat anyone in the entire world except for Spurs. But there are only 6 points, they're a couple points back from that, 7 points back. So I think the league is really open, but history has told us that like you said, a City who is sitting not in first place has something to prove, and you're not going to bet against that. I don't know. I just think that.
I also want to know, when's the last time they've sat in fourth? I was just
thinking about genuinely. I don't know the last time that they were fourth in the
they've always
position.
Been first, second, or third. I feel like anytime I've looked at the table in the past.
Yeah, and to the point, Liverpool on the season has 1 loss. Arsenal has 2 losses. Villa and City both have 3. Lucas, I don't know how many games you all went without losing last season. You went so many games, and that's what it takes to be at the top of the table, where, United has 6 losses or 7 losses, sorry, and they're still in 6. It's just kind of crazy how the league is different this year. So I don't know. I think that they'll pull it away in being top 4, and I also wouldn't be surprised if they still win the league, but seeing them in fourth is something that we're not used to seeing by any means.
Agreed.
Weird stuff. Okay. Well, gentlemen, that concludes this week's episode of the Mecca of Banter podcast. Before we end, we want to give a huge shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, Connor Sindobri. At time of listening, it will be his 29th birthday. So happy birthday, Connor. Dobes, appreciate you being part of this podcast. Couldn't do it without you, and my life as a United fan is better.
You suck.
I need the support, and so it's nice to have that. So shout out to you, Big Dog. Hope you're celebrating in Miami quite well. The rest of you, thank you for listening. Follow us on all of our socials. Hit us up on the YouTube, the Twitter, the TikTok, and we'll see you all next week. Cheers, fellas.
Cheers.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers, boys.